Thank you very much. If you fall into either of two categories tonight, please listen closely. If you have already decided who you intend to vote for tonight, and if it is someone other than Rick Santorum, or secondly, you have not yet decided for whom you are going to cast your vote this evening, please give me 2 minutes of your complete, undivided attention. There are two words that you need to burn into your thoughts and carry with you as you go to fill out your ballot tonight. Those words, number one, contrast. Number two is character. For me, 2012 brings the 14th presidential election during my lifetime. As I have looked back and studied those elections, with but few exceptions have I found, even during the primary phases of those elections, a candidate that I would consider my ideal. And I'm confident that's probably your experience as well. But this year, I have found a man that I have been keeping an eye on for quite a while, and I know exactly where he stands on all of the critical key issues that our country is facing right now, and he has put forth a very specific response in how he would approach and deal with each of those critical issues to our country. He does not duck questions. I know exactly where he stands. And to me, that is important. And I think it is to you as well. I do not want a candidate that I have to guess or hope that he stands for my values, whether socially or fiscally. For the past 30 years, a little more than 30 years, I have been involved in agricultural business development up until about 2.5 years ago, when I was involved in the head-on collision on Interstate 94 with a drunk driver. And as a result of that, permanent and complete blindness and lameness have come into my life. For me, contrasts in life and the character of individuals have become immensely important to me. And as I look at the candidates for president this year, to me there are two that stand out in terms of contrast. That is Barack Obama and Rick Santorum. And the contrasts are the widest because their characters are the most wide and far apart. Rick Santorum stands for loyalty to our founding principles, unswerving devotion, commitment, deep-rooted, conservative Republican values. As you have sensed, I'm sure as I have, the intensity across this nation of negative emotions which have arisen out of the character of someone like Obama. Imagine what it would be like if that same intensity of emotions were turned positively towards the character who most contrasts with Barack Obama. And I do believe that man is Rick Santorum. And just so that we are all on the same page, I want to give you a brief update. It is required for any candidate to receive a total of 1,144 delegate votes at the National Convention to procure the nomination. Today, North Dakota, as well as 9 other states, will be assigning a total of 419 of those over 2,000 total delegates. As of this morning, the candidate nationally in the lead has 180 delegates committed. Rick Santorum has 90. And the remaining 2 candidates have 29 and 23, respectively. Please cast your vote wisely. I urge you to rise up and support the contrast and the character that is exhibited in Rick Santorum. Thank you for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I'd like to introduce our final speaker for this evening, Congressman Ron Paul.
Thank you very much for that very nice reception. Is everybody going to vote tonight? Are we going to win? We always win, right? The cause of liberty is on a roll, let me tell you that. This country is radiant and raring, and tonight we are going to send a very loud message to the rest of the country. And I'll tell you what, I've said so many times, the American people are way ahead of Washington. Washington is sound asleep. We're on the right track, so make sure they hear our message all the way to D.C. That message is not complex. Most people in this country realize that we're having problems. Like we spend too much money now and then. We borrow too much money now and then. Government grows, and leaf by leaps it bound. But one of the things that they have done over these last 100 years that has been very detrimental, especially in the last 40 years, is they want government to grow endlessly. We don't have the money. They run out of borrowing power. Guess what they do? You would have never guessed. They start printing money. That leads to more problems. Now the world's facing a debt crisis. And the debt crisis is a consequence, a natural consequence, a predictable consequence of the monetary system that we have. So we embarked 100 years ago with the central bank, which Thomas Jefferson tried so desperately to prevent. So they haven't done a very good job. They took the dollar of 1913, now is worth 1 penny. So I would say it's time we celebrate next year the 100th anniversary of the Federal Reserve by repealing the Federal Reserve Act. These problems have been going on for a long time. It would be nice if we could blame one person or one administration. It's been going on a long time. So many young people here, I think you're realizing you're getting a bad rap for what you're inheriting. You'd like a much better deal, and the better deal can be found in less government and only sending people to Washington who have actually read the Constitution, who will obey the Constitution, and take their oath of office seriously. For us. Take, for instance, if you're tired of the wars, I hope you're sick and tired of the wars. What if we had returned to the Constitution? The founders made sure in the document, in the Constitution, that the wars would only occur not by the executive branch, but only by the people through their representatives in Congress. That's the way all wars should be declared. If necessary, they should be declared, won, and get them over with, and come home. That's the way it was supposed to be. And for that reason, we essentially have not won one of those wars. It has added a lot of tragedy. Just in these past 10 years, these wars that we're fighting in the Middle East, over 8,500 Americans have died. 44,000 have come back with serious injuries and amputations and all kinds of problems. Hundreds of thousands looking for help because of post-traumatic stress syndrome. At the same time, economically, it's been very damaging. It has added $4 trillion to our national debt. That is what you're inheriting. This is the reason why it is so important. If you're talking about peace and prosperity, you have to change the Constitution and have a lot less war and make a lot more sincere effort to promote the cause of peace. This has been going on for a long time, and both administrations have been doing this. And this is the reason that the message of liberty actually brings people together. Because individuals see that the parties aren't doing a very good job. You like one party to cut the spending, they raise the debt and the spending as well. Another party is supposed to do the job, they go in and nothing changes. So if you look at the candidates today, there is very little difference except for one. Foreign policies never change. Monetary policy doesn't change. There's no challenge to the Federal Reserve System. And most of all, there's no desire to protect personal liberty, personal privacy, protect us from the intrusiveness of the federal government, to protect your right to use the internet. These are the kind of things that are so important to so many people, and unfortunately that is not offered. I believe it is the offering of a program that emphasizes personal liberty, the Constitution, sound monetary policy, and a sensible foreign policy is the reason the momentum is building and the reason why we're getting such a great reception here in North Dakota.
Yeah!
The financial crisis is the biggest one in the history of the world. There was a time when we were a creditor nation. We would have ups and downs, but we were a creditor nation, and we had a lot of productivity, we had a lot of wealth, and we had borrowing power. Today, we are a debtor nation. We're the biggest debtor nation in the history of the world. Our productivity is going down drastically. We create no significant new jobs. At the same time, there's never a lack of a desire for more spending. So what we should be proposing, and what I propose, is in the first year to cut the budget in real terms by $1 trillion. Is to cut the proposed increases. The proposed increases, called baseline budgeting, they assume that the budget will go up by $10+ trillion in the next 10 years. So if they talk about cutting $1 trillion, they're talking about cutting $100 billion a year of proposed increases, which means there's zero cuts. What I'm talking about are real cuts, actually cutting, but you can't do this unless you change policy. If you expect to have the entitlement system, have welfare benefits from cradle to grave, free housing, free food, and free medical care, and free education, you can't do it. If you expect to continue to be the policeman of the world and advocate preemptive war and going into country and occupying countries, if you want that kind of foreign policy, you cannot do it. And you know what will happen if we don't change policy? We are going to end up in a financial crash. There is going to be a dollar crisis, and we are all going to suffer the consequence. So it is in our best interest, not only of the younger generation, but everybody. We're not passing this on to the next generation. We passed it on to this current generation. That is why it's so vital that we get a handle on things, understand what liberty is all about, what the Constitution means, and why limited government and personal liberty and property rights is the road to peace and prosperity. this country to the principles of liberty, that idea is alive and well and growing by leaps and bounds, and that is why this country is changing significantly. The message is loud and clear and growing exponentially, and I am optimistic to believe that we can turn this around, but we have to cut the spending. Now, a lot of people say, well, you can cut this, this, and this, and I actually have a transitional program. I want to cut $1 trillion, but I want to have priorities. And I want to really start with the overseas spending. The overseas spending and the welfare and the occupation, we ought to all be able to agree that spend the money here at home if you have to. But certain budget program. For instance, we made promises to the elderly. They're dependent now, medical care and Social Security and child health care. And actually, my plan will actually protect those individuals. What about protecting the infrastructure, protecting those states and parts of the country that need money for, ports and intercoastal canal and flood projects? Would I vote for that, and would I advocate it by adding more debt and borrowing? No, I would not, but let me tell you how we could do it. We could do it by cutting spending overseas to such an extent you actually cut the deficit and put the money that you want to for some programs in back here at home, not to raise taxes and not to raise the debt and actually lower the debt and don't increase the spending. We can do that by working our way out. For instance, a few years ago, they built an embassy in Baghdad. An embassy we didn't need, and it was close to $1 billion. But that was only the beginning. This year, the appropriation for that embassy was nearly $5 billion to operate it. Now, let's say we need a project here at home. Why can't we cut that $5 billion out, forget about that embassy in Baghdad, that's only going to lead to trouble, take it and cut it in half, take $2.5 billion off the deficit and spend the $2.5 billion here back at home.